So we've been kind of going back and forth with our best of the best series.
Yep.
You and I will have a civil conversation. I'm sure we will agree on which one of these backs had a better career.
All right.
I'm going to give you the floor with your buddy Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, I got to say this about Zeke before I even get to what people saw on game days. Ezekiel Elliott was one of the best teammates that you could have from the standpoint of he was a practicer. This guy showed up for practice. He gave every rep as hard as he could, maybe even harder than in a game sometimes. And I think that made a difference in our program and our ability to be great on both sides of the football. Now, in saying all of that, I got a bunch of stats that'll pretty much tell the story about Ezekiel Elliott. So, average 6.7 yards per carry for his career. 2015 had 23 touchdowns, and a lot of them came from outside of 5 yards, by the way. He went back-to-back 1,800-plus yard seasons, almost had 1,900 yards in 2014, which is a ridiculous number here. Finished 8th in Heisman. And again, this is a guy who probably could have got more credit. Like 2014 was a really hard year for him to win running back of the year, as great of a year as he had, because he had Melvin Gordon in there who had like 2,500 yards and 29 touchdowns, right? And so you got another dude in the conference who was really balling. Zeke was that guy back to back. But this is the thing before I give it to you here real quick that does it for me every time. 220 yards. 11 yards per carry against Wisconsin, 230 yards, 11.6 yards per carry against Alabama, and then 246 yards in a national title game against Oregon. We're talking about the biggest moments you could have as a running back. And this was at a point where we're on our third string quarterback, so everybody knows you're going to turn and hand the pill off, and the dude delivered.
So he tied Eddie George for 5 200-yard games, and those came in the biggest moments too, right?
Yeah.
So I'll give him here's another. I want to talk about their similarities.
Go ahead.
Because you talk about the spark he had.
Yep.
When your best players are your hardest workers,
Yep.
then you have culture.
Yep.
That dude on that Braxton Miller, the best spin move in college
Yep.
football,
He was
pancake.
Yes.
This guy was a phenomenal, maybe the best pass pro running back in college football in his career. Also great in blocking when they get into some of those two-back sets. So selflessness is a big thing. Blake was a captain.
Yep.
Zeke was not a captain.
He was socially he was a little bit out there, but
he was
like
seen as a leader, though, right?
Well,
to your point,
if you follow the example that he had within the bounds of the Woody Hayes Athletic Facility, 100% he was a leader. Now, outside the Woody is a different conversation.
Okay, so all those are very similar pieces of this, and it's going to be hard to compare anyone's 3-game stretch to what you had when Zeke, helped lead you guys to a national title game. But what you had with Blake, and you fault him for this, for some of those touchdowns inside 5 carries. But I look at that as a closer. He set Michigan's single-season rushing touchdown record with 27. Set a Big Ten record for points scored with 168. And I look at this guy like Blake as a closer because, like you said, when you're on your third-string running back with Ohio State, every team that played Michigan knew number 2 was going to get his fair share of carries throughout the game, which meant loaded boxes. And yet, he closed the game with a touchdown versus Washington. Alabama overtime, breaks a few tackles, closes the game there.
Yep.
Also had a 4th down conversion earlier in regulation. Closed the game with the touchdown versus Ohio State, set it up well. Closed the game with the touchdown versus Penn State. So there's your 4 biggest games of the season. And the best backs show up in the 4th quarter. This dude closes out all those games. In my opinion, and I think had he stayed healthy in that 2022 season, this would be a very clear case, because I think if he stays healthy, doesn't get hurt versus Illinois, and it's fair to expect he'd put up the same numbers that Donovan did down the stretch of the season, Blake Corum is your 2022 Heisman winner. I think that would be a heck of a case to try to argue against.
I'm struggling on that one a little bit.
You don't think he'd win the Heisman?
No, which is fine. But I feel like, again, when we're comparing different years and different cases there, he could have won a Heisman without having the numbers that Ezekiel Elliott had, right? I think those are 2 things that could happen. And so for me, it's tough because you can make a legitimate argument that if you dropped Ezekiel Elliott, his 2014 or his 2015 season into this year or last year, he probably could have won a Heisman. Right? I think that's the argument I would make there. Again, the closer point I think is a really good point for Blake Corum because I definitely get on him for those carries. And I do think his coach was showing him appreciation because there were some moments where he would trot Blake in there to get him the touches, and he deserved it because of the legacy there. But he was a closer. All I'm saying is if I'm building my team right now, you know who I'm going with.
I'm going to give one final pitch here, okay? This dude, the community outreach he did, I know you followed that. When we talk about legacy and greatness,
let's talk about it.
What this guy did in the community, to me, that means something. I'm not going to fault Zeke for it because I know he was active in the community as well. But this dude left a significant legacy in Michigan.
This is a good note to end on because I will forever respect Blake Corum for doing that, right? Like, even in the NIL era where people try to get you to do certain things, you don't have to do anything you don't want to. And it takes somebody who really does have a heart for the community to do that. I would make the argument that if Zeke played in the NIL era, he would have done the same thing. I have watched this man on the Buckeye Cruise for Cancer. The check that he writes every year starts with $21,000. He wore 21 when he was with the Cowboys. That's the number it starts at for him, and it goes up. These are both the types of dudes that, like, you're going into a game and you're like, I need him on my team.
You know what's funny is we've done this. We did Aiden Hutchinson versus Chase Young, Braxton versus JJ, now Zeke. Well, when you have players like what we're arguing right now, it leads to a national championship. That's my biggest takeaway in these debates.
And to spin that forward, too, this is why you got two of the most historic programs in the sport.
Yes.
Because you got legacies like this that are floating around there.
Absolutely.